and thanks for joining us for another episode of Mid-American Gardener. I'm Tanisha Spain, your host, and as you can tell, we're in the studio with our guest who needs no introduction, but we'll have him introduce himself and tell you a little bit about him before we get started. So,
all
take
right.
it away.
Well, I'm still Chuck Voigt, and I'm still retired from the University of Illinois. My last department was crop sciences. Horticulture was my field, vegetable crops and herbs specifically. And my actual undergraduate degree was in nursery crop management or something.
So you remember we visited Chuck in the summer at his house, at his family farm actually, and he walked us through his garden. And so today is kind of an extension of that. This also comes from the family farm, right?
It does.
So tell everybody what we're going to be doing, and I love that this is woven into some family history for Chuck as well. So I'll let you share what we're going to be demonstrating.
Okay. Well, we're going to try to talk about it, and we're going to talk about black walnuts, the eastern black walnut, Juglans nigra, Juglans nigra.
Okay.
It's a tree that kind of invades abandoned fields.
Oh.
You know, like a lot of things like wild cherries and mulberries get planted by the birds because they eat them and it goes through them and the seeds remain. Well, squirrels bury lots and lots and lots of walnuts and acorns and never remember them all. So they pop up.
They end up in my flower bed.
They pop up in a field. And if the field is plowed regularly, they don't have much of a chance. But once you abandon that field, walnuts are one of the first trees to come in, and probably one of the hardest wooded trees that come in fast, because a lot of the other things come in are very soft and don't live for long periods of time.
I just know that the fruits, my boys love throwing these all day and all night because we have a walnut tree on our property, and I just see the boys chucking them across the yard. So it's the squirrels and the children at my house that keep these babies in business.
Hopefully they don't throw them hard enough to bury them, but yeah. So anyway, and then I think it was last fall, Ella, who's on the show a lot from Tazewell County, brought in a walnut, was big honking thing. I was amazed.
Yeah.
But part of it might have been Ella has smaller hands than I do, but it was huge.
It's a good size, huh?
Because the ones we have at the farm are not super huge, and I don't know exactly why that is, but over the years.
Now, do you guys have several of these?
Yes.
You do?
In my youth, there was a line of 10 of them, most of which were evenly spaced. So there was a little competition between them. Then a couple that were set off to the side, and then one that's over by where Grandma was planting trees. So I'm not sure that there was one bur oak and one walnut that she planted, and then they would use the walnuts from that original tree to plant the row of them, because they're spaced too evenly to have been like squirrel planted in an old fence row.
Got it. And these go back in your family for how long that you've traced back, the trees and the farm? Because I think that's fascinating.
Well, the Grandma was planting these trees, according to the story I was told, when she was 12. And she was born in 1853, so that would have been 1865. This bur oak and maybe a walnut, maybe a second bur oak, I'm not completely sure, was planted then, and then the first part of the house was built in 1868.
So what month is it that we see that green, would you call that a fruit, the entire thing? What's that called?
Yeah, I would say it's a fruit.
Okay. What month usually do we see those ripening and starting to fall?
Well, they might start to fall in late August through September.
Okay.
And then by October, the tree is pretty much shedding them.
And you want to pick them up off the ground, or do you want to pull them off the trees when you?
Well, unless you have very young trees.
Oh yeah, I guess you won't be able to.
You're going to need a cherry picker or a helicopter. No, picking them up off the ground, because it's a better indicator of when they're actually mature or when they fall off the tree.
So these that you brought in today to demonstrate, you've had since the fall?
Yes.
Okay. And then do you peel, walk us through step by step, how do you get that coating?
Okay. Well, here, historically, when I was a kid, we would pick them up in 5-gallon pails, bushel baskets, whatever. And Dad had a big pair of leather mittens, so because if you especially when they start to get black and tarry and soupy, it'll stain your fingers. And so we didn't want to do that. We had that, and we also had like an old pair of tongs, like you'd take sweet corn out of the water with or whatever. And so pick them up with one of those things and put them in it. And we had a wooden hand corn sheller.
Okay.
Stood about yay high. And it has a crank on one side and a heavy steel flywheel on the other side, so you keep momentum going.
Oh, got it.
So when a ear of corn or a bunch of walnuts hits the mechanism, it doesn't slow it down, stop.
Sure.
So, child labor.
It was a different time.
Yeah, you have to get that going. We took turns, Dad and I.
And I'm sure you thought it was fun as a kid.
Yeah, and then you'd feed them in, and then there's like a plate rubbing against a stationary plate, and the plate has like, not like fingers, but like little projections on it, so it grabs them. And the diameter of a walnut and the diameter of a corn cob are similar. So instead of stripping off the corn kernels, which it would do with an ear of corn, it stripped off the hull from the walnuts. And so theoretically, you get just walnuts coming out where the corn cobs would, and then the husks fall out the bottom. Well, they're so sticky and gooey, you get a lot of husks coming out with the walnuts, and then you have to pick them out again with the tongs or whatever.
So it wasn't perfect, but it got the job done.
Yeah, then we put them back in a 5-gallon pail, cover them with water, swish that around, dump that off, keeping the walnuts in the water again, at least 2 rinses to get as much of the tarry stuff off of them as you can. And then we'd lay them out in the sunshine the rest of a day or overnight maybe. It's hard to trust squirrels overnight, but to get them just kind of air dry quickly, and then put them in shallow boxes or something and bring them into somewhere indoors that's squirrel proof to dry out for a while.
And that's kind of where we are now, right?
That's where we are now.
Okay.
The process has changed a little bit, because it's hard to get that old corn sheller out, and it's a little rickety in its old age, and it's really a 2-man job. And
yeah,
there's sometimes my sister counts as the second man, and sometimes not. So dragging heavy things, probably not. So we have just adapted the system to wear rubber boots and just kind of rub them with our toe out of the husk.
Oh, okay.
And then we both have stick pickers, for picking up sticks. So we just pick them up with that and put them in the pail, and then
You've improvised.
and then do the 2 rinses. It
works.
Like every step of this process, it's kind of tedious, but there's a nostalgia in it for us that we do that.
We've got the jars, and we can put up a picture of those, the ones that you've already gotten.
Yeah, from last year. That's the one thing I forgot to bring today was the results of
this. That's all right. We've got the picture, and it tells the story.
We're going to crack a few, but not enough to make a real show. And so it's better to see a couple of peanut butter jars full of them from last year. As I told you, I probably eat too much peanut butter.
You can never eat too much.
A lot of this is probably peanut butter. So I end up with a lot of empty peanut butter jars.
Well, I'm excited. Let's go. Let's crack some. I'm excited.
All right. Well, just for the benefit of the viewing public, we are going to. I'm going to see. This is what I found works out pretty well. Okay. Because you need dexterity in this hand. If you're left-handed, it would work the other way.
I am a lefty.
I kind of remembered that. So, but just to do this. Just this kind of glove on both hands is going to work. I bought these. I got 3 pairs for not too much, and I've done 1,500 walnuts or something with them, and it's only just now starting to wear a little bit. So I'm going to end up with. They come in a 3-pack, so I'm going to end up with 3 right gloves that are pristine and 3 left gloves that are a little worn. And just because we're on TV and subject to liability, we're going to wear eye protection.
Which is funny. Chuck says, bring some safety goggles. Of course, I couldn't find any, but I do have 2 sons who like Nerf guns, and so these are Nerf gun goggles. Here we go.
So anyway.
All right.
And you see sometimes some of that doesn't necessarily get off of them, but that's probably all right if they go ahead and dry out. Now, a technique that I read about probably in the 70s, and I don't know if it was in Foxfire or Mother Earth News, somewhere they were talking about how to get the biggest pieces out of cracking a walnut, because Dad just used to smash them and then put them in a pan. We go into Mom. She had nut picks.
I
And I don't know.
those.
Do you remember the like a section of a log that came with mixed nuts in it?
Now that I don't. You got me on that one.
It still had the bark on the outside, and it was hollowed out inside with like a little wooden island left in the middle.
Yes, and that's where the tools would go.
And the little
Yes.
that had holes, and the tools stood
now
there.
I do remember.
And then you had like pecans and
Yes.
English walnuts and
Usually around Christmas time, we would see those.
and almonds. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And so then you would have just that little the crunch cracker. Well, that I think one walnut would send that to the
garbage.
junkyard. And there are wonderful mechanical crackers. And if you're ever at a loss for something to do, and they're online anyway, look up walnut crackers and watch a couple of the videos. There's a couple of them that
What's the specific one that you told me to look up?
well, okay, it's Grandpa's Goody Getter.
Grandpa's Goody Getter.
And it's great because you can see him he's got a long lever arm pushing it down. There's like a cup on the bottom and a cup that comes down from the top, and that exerts pressure kind of more on the outer part of the shell, more so than when I beat on it with a hammer, it's specifically on the top. So what typically happens is it's going to break into four pieces because it's got a suture around it, and it would naturally break into two halves as it starts to grow. But here's the technique is the end that's attached to the tree is this one. It's kind of a bigger bump. This end, where the pistillate flower was, there's a little point.
Okay.
You stand it on the point, and I'm not sure if you hold it by the sutures or opposite the sutures. I haven't figured that out yet.
Okay, here we go.
But then,
Give me magic.
okay. And there's a connective part that's sort of shaped like the spade on a playing card. And that, breaking them this way, you never see that intact, or very seldom. But that's the start of what you're looking to.
That's it, huh?
Right. And I keep a pail handy. When I'm doing this, I'm sitting down. The anvil is on like a piece of log that gets it up. I need a taller log because my neck gets stiff from bending over. And then periodically I'll wipe it off. And you can see that this one is split out in a half. This one has split a little better because one of the quarters looks like it's ready to pop out.
This is a lot of work, Chuck.
I told you.
You got to really want these.
There has to be some nostalgia involved.
Yes.
Because I look online and the cracked nuts are selling for like $17 a pound, and having done this now for some 1,500 walnuts, that's a pretty good deal.
That's a pretty good deal. That's a pretty good
And
deal.
what I'm not sure is it's $8 for the uncracked walnuts in the shell, and I think that's not as good a deal because very little of the weight is going to be walnuts. So don't balk at paying what they're asking because even with
seeing it live.
Even with machines, okay, and then you go back through and take each one of these, the remaining quarters or halves or whatever, and try to get the tap just right.
Oh my gosh.
To get at it. And then if you start to get frustrated, you can go in with, well, actually I did break it.
There you go.
And then you just continue. That one's coming apart, so you get that one.
That's your scrap bucket, right? Well, now what do you do with your scraps?
I mostly just put them on a bonfire and get rid of them.
Yeah.
They're used industrially as like in sandblasting and cleaning up other things because they are incredibly hard and sharp.
Yes.
Because when I started doing it this year, I was doing it on the back step at the farm, and inevitably someone would get, brought in with my shoes.
Sure.
And so when I take a shower at the farm, I'm stepping on walnuts
Oh,
constantly
gosh.
and saying things I probably shouldn't say.
Okay. This is serious work if you're going to just be doing it manually.
Right.
Wow.
And the nice part about
That's one, right?
Right.
Okay, so
And this particular batch of walnuts doesn't have the most wonderful nut meats in the world, but
there's one.
it's the ones I was working on. And I timed myself and doing it so that I'm doing all the retrieval as opposed to the way Mom and Dad used to do it, where he would just break them into pieces, send them into her. She'd pick out what she could get, send out what she couldn't. He would crack them again and do it that way. Doing this way, I'm doing the whole thing. When I'm done, they're picked out. My sister goes through and makes sure there aren't any little tiny shards of shell, because we all know that's one of the downfalls of nuts, is if you bite into a piece of shell, you kind of lose interest in it.
Can I eat it? Yeah? Okay. Yeah. Delicious. All right, Chuck.
Much more intense flavor than the English
good.
version.
Well, thank you. Thank you
Well,
for
now
coming.
wait a second.
Oh, I don't get out of this?
Not at all. That was the joy of me doing this.
Okay, here we go. Pointy side down. I don't like that you're backing up. Man,
Yeah, and you have to really trust your hammer skills.
which
too.
I don't. All right, gang, we'll be here all day waiting for me to crack this open. Thanks, Chuck, for coming. Thank you for watching. And I actually was not able to crack one of those walnuts. So I'm going to keep practicing, and maybe this fall I will be a better walnut cracker on the show. So moving on to houseplants now. We've got one of our newer panelists joining us today. Lauren Quinn is here via Skype. So Lauren, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you before we get into today's discussion.
Sure. Yep, I'm Lauren Quinn, and I am the founder of the local CU Plant People group here in town, which is a Facebook group for those of you who don't know. We have about 4,000 members in the group right now, and people join to talk about plants, both houseplants and gardening. And it's a great community, and I hope everybody joins.
It really is a great community, and that's kind of how we got to know each other, through the plant swaps and some of the events that you've had. So today we're going to talk about houseplants, and I know you have a fave, right? Hoyas, those are your jam. So talk a little bit about why you like them, and then you brought several varieties to share. So I'm excited to see what you've got.
Yeah, so Hoyas, a lot of people think of these as kind of your grandmother's houseplant. They, for a long time, weren't particularly popular. But recently, in the last year or so, they've really picked up in popularity, and people are understanding that there's a huge amount of variety in the genus. A lot of them will flower regularly in a home environment, which is exciting. Not very many houseplants do that. So they offer a whole lot of different forms and shapes and colors, and they've become kind of the hot ticket item where people are spending quite a lot of money for like a single, a little tiny stem or cutting to be sent through the mail, that kind of thing. And I have caught the bug. Definitely have a
Okay,
lot
how
of
many? If you had to put a number on it, because I had to ask, how many would you guess?
I think I have about 50 varieties of
Oh my
Hoyas.
gosh, you weren't kidding. You did get bit by the bug.
Yeah, there's a lot more than that out there, so I actually have what's considered nowadays a relatively small collection, but I'm very excited about the ones I have. So.
Awesome. Okay, let's see what you brought.
Okay, so this is a very small example of your basic Hoya carnosa. I've got a much bigger one in another part of my house that I inherited from a family member, and it's like 25 years old, this huge variety. But I took a little cutting of it, and you can just see they're called wax plants, and they're very stiff leaves generally, kind of succulent almost. So people think that they're relatively easy care because they're, like succulents, you can kind of forget them for a while and they'll be fine. But any case, I'll get back to that in a minute. This is the general sort of Hoya carnosa that a lot of people grew up with in their grandmother's kitchen. But there's been a lot of different types of Hoya carnosa varieties that have been developed. This one is a Chelsea. So
Ooh,
it's got sort of heart-shaped leaves that have little kind of dimples in them almost.
that's
Uh,
really pretty. And you could see, I mean, it's
and
so shiny. You can tell it's really waxy, and the leaves look really thick.
yeah, they're very thick and they're stiff, like you can't really bend them very well. And you can see this one's starting to grow a new vine and new leaves, and it's reverting back to a plain carnosa because it's no longer looking kind of heart-shaped here. So this stem I'd probably cut off and to encourage it to continue being, more
Hmm.
heart-shaped instead of growing back out that way. Um, and then there's a whole bunch of variegated carnosa varieties. Excuse me, getting very close to the camera, sorry. Um, this is a Hoya carnosa Crimson Princess.
Hmm. That one's really
And you
pretty too.
can see it's
That
got
one
a lot of,
reminds me, when you talk about Hoyas at Grandma's house, that
oh,
one really
um,
reminds me of a plant that you would
okay.
see at Grandma's.
It's got some, if it's in high light, the white part can kind of turn pink or can come in pink and then go back to white. New stems are kind of a pinkish reddish color, which is really pretty. Um, and then here's another carnosa variety, which is really fun, I think. People might not like this, but I do. It's a Hoya carnosa compacta. And you can see all the leaves are really curled up on themselves, which is kind of strange. This one's a variegated version, but it also comes in a plain green. And this one hangs down nicely. It kind of looks like Medusa's hair to me,
Those are fun.
a really wild looking variety. So even in just the Carnosa species, there's a lot of variety, but then there's, numbers and numbers of other species as well.
Now, I have to
Um,
ask, last time we had you on the show, we got a lot of feedback about your cabinet behind you. People were very curious about what it is, what you've got growing in there. So, if you could, because it caught people's eye, it caught my eye. So, what is that? Is it an indoor greenhouse? Is it a cabinet? Tell us about it.
yeah, sure. This is one of my in one of my grow light cabinets, I would call that. This one happens to be made by IKEA. So it's a Millsbow cabinet from IKEA. And the craze right now, again, is taking several of the types of glass cabinets from IKEA and outfitting them with grow lights to create sort of an indoor greenhouse. So if you look on Instagram or Facebook, you'll see hashtag IKEA greenhouse cabinet. So that's kind of what this is. And you'll see it's a tall three, three shelf system. And this is weather stripping on the door.
Hmm.
So it keeps the humidity inside. I've got a couple of trays down at the bottom, which maybe you can see.
Yes, we can see
Uh,
those. Wow.
they are filled with lightweight expanded clay aggregate balls, also known as leca, and water. So that could be any kind of pebble tray that you might have, filling it with water to keep the humidity inside the cabinet. I also have a small fountain going in the back, so it kind of keeps the water moisture in the air. A couple of fans are important to keep the air moving about, so it's not going to get too stagnant in there.
Hmm.
And then, of course, I've got a grow light on every level, and I've got pretty high power grow lights that keep my Hoyas very happy. And almost everything in here for now is a Hoya. And yeah, in some of the Hoyas, the nice something people really like about Hoyas is that some of them become sun stressed and they get this really kind
Hmm.
of reddish
That's
color
pretty. Very pretty.
under. So this is a Hoya Merillii, very nicely sun stressed. So
That is a
that's,
really neat setup. And
thank you.
I'm eyeballing it thinking, where could I put one of those at my
Yeah.
house?
Yeah. And they've got different styles and
Sure.
sizes of them. So they come in a skinnier, taller, upright kind, and there's a variety of them. But they are very hard to come by because people have caught on to this and they
Yes.
sell out very easily and quickly. So
I wonder if
if
people
you
could get creative and sort of maybe make their own and,
well,
find.
that's great. So I actually did that on my other cabinet over here.
Oh, this
This
is
is
great. Oh,
just a
wow.
hutch, basically, that I found, or that I inherited from a family member, actually. And you can see it doesn't have the humidity
Mm-hmm.
in it, but I did set up grow
You've
lights
got
in
the
there.
lights in
So,
there, and it's always a good
yeah,
time when you can stuff more plants in and going up, right? That's the name of the game, to get more. So awesome. Well,
right.
both of your setups are definitely goals. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for coming on the show today. And we're going to definitely have you back here soon because I know that there are a couple other topics that we didn't get to talk about today, like root rot and just some common things people run into at home with their houseplants. So we're going to bookmark there and we're going to bring you back to talk about that on another show. But thank you so much, Lauren. Always a pleasure.
Okay.
All
Bye.
right. And thank you so much for watching. We're out of time. It goes so fast. If you have any questions, you can send us an email to yourgarden@gmail.com or look us up on Facebook. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Good night.